Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Adventure Built. Today we have a box of awesomeness from Desert Does It. It's going in my 2020 Tacoma. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel. Desert Does It is a new company, but they're the only game in town making any attempt to adjust the angles of the Tacoma seats, because I'll be honest, they're not the greatest. So they sent me the front seat jackers, the rear seat jackers, the front multi-mount panel, and the rear multi-mount panel. As you guys know, my 2020 Tacoma brand new has the completely electronic adjustable seats. This is just gonna make it one step easier to make that adjustment for expert comfort. This is a really cool innovation. I cannot wait to get this thing in my truck and see how it does. Now, all of these pieces are basically unbolt the old stuff, put these in, and then put some either new bolts in or put the factory bolts back in. Super straightforward installation. It should go pretty quick. So let's get going. So these are all the tools you're going to need to install the front seat jacker, the rear seat jacker, and any of the multi-mount panels. Phillips head screwdriver, 6mm Allen key, 6mm Allen socket, 14mm socket, 15mm socket, socket extension, socket driver, and a foot-pound torque wrench. We're gonna start with the Desert Does It front seat jacker. Now this is a finely machined piece of aluminum, and what this does is it changes the angle of the seat to make it more comfortable. Another thing that I can really appreciate is the hardware. All of the hardware they use is metric. Nothing is more annoying than having to go get standard sockets when you're working on your metric vehicle. Step number one to install the front seat jacker is going to be using a 14mm socket and removing both front bolts on your seat. Step number two is going to be loosening the two back bolts of the seat. Now these two back bolts have covers on them, and all you do is grab on the outside edge closest to the rail and just pull these covers back and they pop right off. I also removed my Husky floor mats just for more clearance. Now we've got both bolts exposed, all we're gonna do is loosen this bolt and this bolt. Remember, don't remove these, just loosen them. It will help index their front holes later. Step number three is going to be using your hand and pushing back on the headrest to lift the front of the seat up to get the new blocks in. Now step four is going to be taking the space you've created by removing the front bolts and loosening the back bolt. The front seat has a nub that indexes into this hole here, as well as the front seat jacker has a nub as well, and that indexing post seats into the Tacoma seat well, and then the seat indexes on top of the Desert Does It seat jacker, and as you can see, the holes line up perfectly. Step number five is using the factory M10 fine thread bolts to fasten the lift blocks to the floor of the Tacoma. And with that nice and tight, we're going to torque it to 27 foot-pounds. Here's a little cheat that I found out you can do to keep the seat off the bracket while you're tightening everything down. I took a piece of cordage, I tied it to the back seat headrest, and then I strung it to the front seat headrest and just tightened it down with a couple knots. All this does is it lifts the front seat off the Desert Does It front seat jackers just enough so you're not struggling to get those bolts in nice and tight. Step number six is using the provided M10 by 1.25 25mm bolts. They're coarse thread and they fasten the seat to the lift blocks. And we're only gonna put these in finger tight. I've got the front seat jacker completely installed, but the bolts are on finger tight only because I still have to mount the rear seat jacker. However, before I do the rear seat jacker, I'm going to install the front multi-mount panel. Now this is the panel that hooks up all of the cool goodies on the front of my seat. This is gonna be cool. First things first, we have to do a little pre-assembly on the workbench. The front multi-mount panel comes in 3 pieces. This is the main piece, and these are the end pieces. They all connect together with 6 Phillips head screws. All we're going to do is screw this all together. And now with this thing pre-assembled, it's ready to go in my truck. To attach the front multi-mount panel, you use 4 of these 6mm Allen head bolts to attach the front multi-mount panel to the front seat jacker. So I'm going to start these all by hand. Because of the way the seat angles right here, I actually have to use a manual 6mm Allen wrench. I could not get it with the socket. I've got the front seat jacker and the front multi-mount panel completely installed. Now it's time to move to the rear. Step number 1 to install the rear seat jacker is to remove the 2 factory bolts on the back of the seat. Step number 2 is loosening the 2 front seat bolts. However, from the front seat jacker, I left those 2 bolts loose, so that's done. Step number 3 is pushing forward on the headrest from the back seat to give yourself room to add the spacers that you want to add. Now for the rear seat jacker, I'm only going to use a 1/2 inch spacer because I kind of want to have the seat elevated more in the front than the back. The kit comes with 1/4 inch spacers, 1/2 inch spacers, and 3/4 inch spacers, and you can stack these up to make an inch of lift if need be. And along with those different thickness spacers, it comes with 2 different length bolts. One is 40mm and one is 60mm. You use the 40mm bolt with a 1/2 inch spacer or a 1/4 inch spacer. Anything over that, if you're stacking up 3/4 inch or an inch, you want to go with the 60mm bolt. I have both 1/2 inch spacers in and the 40mm bolts, and it's still loose in here, and that's because I have one more treat to add to the party. This is the rear multi-mount panel, and all you do is slide this. The insert brackets to this are slotted. Is slide this between the rear seat bracket and the 1/2 inch spacer in my application. Be sure you push this all the way forward to seat those slots as deep as they go. And utilizing our 14mm socket, gonna tighten these bolts down nice and tight. And now we're gonna torque it to 27 foot-pounds. And to finish it off, we're going to reinstall the caps. I've got the rear seat jacker and the rear multi-mount panel installed, and it looks great. Now, I wholeheartedly understand that the rear multi-mount panel will diminish the footroom for any backseat passenger sitting behind the driver's seat a lot. However, my boys are older, my youngest boy's 15, and he rides mainly behind the passenger seat because my wife gives him more footroom than I'm willing to do. With that being said, I need to finish the install by torquing down the front bolts on the front seat jacker, and then this thing will be done and we get to load it up with goodies. I've got the Desert Does It front seat jacker and rear seat jacker installed. I've got about an inch in the front and a 1/2 inch in the rear, and it just kind of alleviates some of those angles that are awkward with the seating position of the Tacoma. The front multi-mount panel is super cool. I have my Glock 19 on that. I have a multi-tool and a flashlight and a little knife that I'm kind of playing with as far as the fitment goes. It's a little different on how they have to mount. I'm using a clip from an in the waistband holster to sit in there. It moves a little bit, but it's not bad at all. It's super, super doable. So I'm gonna keep playing around with this front seat setup because I haven't really driven with it. I have only put it in there and sat in there, and it seems to clear my legs now. I'm just gonna wait and see how it is driving. Now the rear seat multi-mount panel, I'm gonna designate only for a fire extinguisher. That way I have one readily available. I just have to buy a mount and a fire extinguisher that will fit right there in that position. And a huge shout out to Desert Does It for sending me this sweet jacker kit and the multi-mount panels. A great product, I highly recommend it. And again guys, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.